The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, Merry Meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the Para-X Radio Network. Tonight I opened with Greenwood Grove by Dave the Bard, and it's a song that covers the Celtic meaning of symbolic trees. As Dave explains on his website, the song is a complete 20-tree ogam in order as sung in bardic mnemonic and is a nature-based song. And tonight is a nature-based show. My guest is Tamarack Song, and he spent his life studying the world's Aboriginal peoples, apprenticing to elders, and learning traditional hunter-gatherer survival skills. He spent years alone in the woods, as well as living with a pack of wolves. Now, there are times during those years that he talked more with animals than he did with people, and his goal is to help everyone learn animal language who wishes to do so that they too can look into the eyes of a wolf or just talk to the birds and squirrels outside their windows. In 1987, he founded the Teaching Drum Outdoor School in the wilderness of northern Wisconsin. He's the author of several books, including the one we'll be talking about tonight, Becoming Nature, Learning the Language of Wild Animals and Plants. Now, if anybody has any questions for Tamarack, please send me a note in private chat and we'll get it right through. And once again, if you're not in chat, you're listening live and you have a question, please come over to www.para-x.com and ask away. Welcome, Tamarack. How are you?
Thank you, Marla. I'm great, and I'm looking forward to this sharing.
Well, we're looking forward to the listening, so this is perfect. And, you know, you actually do live in a forest, and your yard is a certified wildlife habitat, and that, to a city dweller like myself and many of my listeners, is really enviable, especially those who practice nature-based religions and nature lovers in general. Tell us a little bit about your world and where your love and respect for all living things came to be.
Well, my earliest memories are of my mother, who grew up during the Depression on a small immigrant farm. They had 39 acres and 14 children.
Wow.
And they had to forage and gather. They had to be frugal. They had to open up to the mother's gifts. There was no other way. And I talk with my mother about it. She's still alive. She's 87 years old. And when she talks about those times, she's not talking about deprivation and misery. She's talking about how much fun they had going out and gathering hazelnuts and looking for snapping turtles in the springtime that came up the little stream, and gathering wild dandelion greens and all the things they used to do. And she still does it. She's 87 years old, and she still goes out and gathers and forages. It's just in her blood. There's no desperation there. There's no regret, no remorse. And this is where I picked it up. My earliest memories are of going out with her. She gave me I was about 3 years old, I think, and she gave me a little pink porcelain coffee cup, and I would hold that with both of my little hands, and I still remember it. And we went out to pick wild strawberries in the late spring, and we went out to pick wild asparagus, and she showed me how to make a flute out of a willow branch when I was a little older, 4 or 5 years of age. And I have all these memories, and I just owe it to my mother. She just connected me right away.
And that was a really great start. And then you kind of embellished it as you went along. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I was reading on your website. I mean, this is not just something you talk about. This is a lifestyle for you. That you and your family live quite natively still. I mean, you heat with wood, you drink lake water, the facilities are outdoors, but you live in a house. I mean, but there's no TV, no stereo. So you use very few of the house's amenities. And I think that's kind of, as you said, it's kind of like lodge living in a sense.
It is. If you come into my house in the exterior, it looks pretty much like a regular Northwoods cottage, and cedar shake siding, and we have electricity and plumbing. However, I don't use the toilet. I go out in the woods all the time. The toilet's there for guests. If you come in and you have a meal with us, we sit in a circle on the floor in the living room. We have a couple pieces of furniture, but they're backed up against the wall. Those are for guests, again, who are accustomed to furniture. But the way we live is the circle way. It's what I learned from the native elders here. We sit in a circle. We eat our food traditionally. We ask for a blessing for the food, and we pass our bowls around from the eldest to the youngest, women before men. And we honor all these traditions. It's the way I live.
Wow. Just got a quick question from the chat room. She wants to know, as you're talking about your mother, who taught her all of that?
Well, my grandmother, who, rumor has it, she was an illegitimate child, and rumor has it there was a native man who came through the small farming community where she lived, where her family lived in the late 1800s, and they had an affair, and she was, or her mother had an affair, and my grandmother was the result of that affair, and it was a cover-up. However, that's just blood. My grandmother did not learn anything directly from her native father because he wandered on. What I've learned is that it's in our blood. All of us are intrinsically native people. Our DNA is still imprinted with the ways of our ancestors. We have these ancestral memories. And we see it in little children. They are naturally wild. We have to domesticate our children. You know, most kids don't like putting clothes on at first, you know. We have to train them to do that. They're spontaneous beings. And we need to condition them to listen to us in a way that children wouldn't normally listen when they first go to school. They have to learn how to sit still, how to be passive receptors, and be quiet when the teacher is talking, and get up when the bell rings, and sit down again when the bell rings, and raise your hand to go to the bathroom, and all those sorts of things that condition us to domestication, to a life of domestication.
Who were your teachers?
Well, my first teachers were the wild animals. I was fortunate to grow up in a small farming community. My backyard was the fields and swamps and forests of east central Wisconsin. That's just rolling glacial land. It was beautiful. And I spent more time, as you already mentioned, I spent more time with the animals than I did with people. Even when I started going to school, I would get home and I would throw my books down and go run out in the woods right away. That was my home. That's where I felt comfortable. And inevitably, I would go to school the next day and my homework wouldn't be done, and I'd have to stay after for a half hour to do my homework, and I got home again and I just did the same thing. They couldn't get it out of me. I just did it. The weekends, all the time I was out in the woods and the swamps. You know, when I was 6 years old, I made myself a little raft out of inner tubes, and I was paddling down the streams and always bringing home frogs or turtles or something. And my mother was such a beautiful support. It was great. She just wanted me to be who I was, and I was never completely domesticated, so I had a head start in life, as I consider it. I loved it.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, you say in the book that each of us is a child of nature, and you just said about the DNA being imprinted in us. And I know personally that even though I live in the city, I have to bring nature to me. I mean, so I've created, you know, my own personal little tiny garden, and I spend lots of time digging in the dirt and planting and replanting and nurturing. And in the process, I've been known to stop and talk to a curious lizard or two, although they don't usually talk back too well. They're a little skittish and they go running off.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are lots of people and tons of people who seem content to live without the benefit of Mother Earth's blessings. Why is it important for everybody to become nature?
Well, I think it's for a number of reasons. First of all, because I don't think we can be truly living in a state of joy. I don't mean just happy, because happiness, sadness, they're just flip sides of the same coin. These are the surface ripples that go over the deep ocean of joy, which is living in balance with the mother, with the earth mother. And the reason it's so important to find this balance, to live in balance with nature, well, just look around us. We are destroying our mother planet. We're destroying our bed.
Mm-hmm.
We're destroying our nurturance. We're destroying each other. We're fighting all the time. We're either fighting with our mates, our partners. We're struggling at work. We have international struggles. We have struggles. Look at the political sideshow that's going on right now
Yeah.
with the primaries. Wherever you look, the schools, the struggles in the schools, the lockdowns in schools, it's a mess. It's just a terrible mess. Global warming, any of us can go on and on with the litany. What is going on here? Are all these things just happening spontaneously? I doubt it. There's something intrinsically out of balance that is causing all of this. Otherwise, there is no way mathematically this could be explained. All these things would just not happen spontaneously. They just would not happen because we're destroying ourselves.
Right.
So it's so important that we return to this intrinsic balance, that we listen to our original instructions because they're there. They're there for all of us.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think with all some of the natural things that happen, and we've had quite a few bad things in the recent years, I truly believe that it's Mother Earth fighting back. Because you can only take so much abuse before you start kicking. And so then we get the horrible earthquakes. We get the horrible tsunamis. We get, I just can't help but think that's where it's coming from. And we as people should really start to smarten up before there is no more Earth.
I think you're right, Marla. We think we're such intelligent creatures, and we have a tremendous capacity for living in balance, for straightening out the mess we've created. And I'm really optimistic. I'm the eternal optimist.
Good for you.
I see more and more of us awakening, and I have to believe that there's hope. And ultimately, there's going to be, if worse comes to worse, there's going to be a tremendous cleansing, and whether the human species persists or not is really secondary, because the earth is going to go on. There's going to be a cleansing, and there will be a restoration. There will be a new balance. It may not be what we like, and it may not be what we know now, but there is going to be a new balance.
And we've been hearing this quite a bit. I mean, from every different type of genre. It's not just coming from one group of people. It's coming from everyone, from mediums to naturalists to, the whole gamut. And obviously, nobody's listening to anybody else in general, so everybody is getting that. And it's like when you're doing tarot, for example, and you're dealing out cards, and you keep getting cards that mean the same thing over and over and over again. It's like they try to bang the message into your head. And with this, we are hearing this over and over again. There's going to be a cleansing. There's going to be this. There's going to be, call it whatever you want. Everybody's got a different name for what's going to happen. Yeah. But they are doing it. And it's something that I don't think it's too late for us to change. Some of the damage can't be repaired, but certainly any more damage might be lethal in that respect. Yes,
most definitely. There's a simple solution to me. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's simple. And that is to return to our roots, to listen to our intuitive voices, to listen to the guidance all around us, the birds, the wind. It's all speaking the same thing, all speaking the same language. And, you mentioned the animals to start with, and how you take the lizards, you take pieces of nature into you. And a good example is Christine Shiner, the woman who illustrated the book that we're starting to talk about here. She lives in downtown Brooklyn. Now, you can't get any more metropolitan than that. You can't get any more urban than that.
Right.
And she writes a nature column, believe it or not.
Wow.
In downtown Brooklyn, she goes out at night, and she sees raccoons. And there's the occasional fox who comes through downtown Brooklyn. And there are pigeons and sparrows and robins and cardinals. And a lot of the animals at night they come. You wonder where the earth is. You wonder where the plants are. Well, you know the planters and the flowers and such that people put out. Well, there are animals in there, and people don't see them in the daytime oftentimes.
Right.
Except that there are bees and butterflies, and she talks about all of this nature right in the concrete jungle. It's just beautiful. It's there. And she's turning people on to this. She takes people out for nature walks in Brooklyn, believe it or not. So, and it just astounded me when I heard this, because I live next door to a wilderness, a federally designated wilderness, and when I take people out for a nature walk, they are out in obvious nature. There are bears and wolves and giant pine trees and, classical nature, And she's walking amongst skyscrapers, and she is talking about the nature that's there. And that just goes to show it's everywhere. You cannot suppress or deny nature. And the beauty of it is that nature is also our nature. And here's where I'd like to start to encourage people to recognize that we are already nature, that it is already there. And the reason we cannot connect with what we consider to be nature out there is because of these layers of conditioning that we've accumulated as partly as survival mechanisms and just partly as conditioning to live in a civilized society. But that's just the outer surface. Those are just the habits and patterns that we've been conditioned to function with. That's not the true self. And we ought not accept that as being who we are, because it's not. We're just trained animals. We're just trained animals going through motions. And there are a lot of people who are just not truly happy. I work as a therapist also, and I've seen recent research coming out that shows that the best therapy for stress and depression is taking people out in nature, believe it or not. Talk therapy, okay. Drugs and medications, okay. They may have their place. I don't know. I don't see a need for them, actually, because the research shows that just taking people out from their regular environment, the stress-inducing environment, and allowing them to breathe, to relax, to open up their senses, it's cleansing. It's tremendous therapy. And I think the fundamental reason for that is that this is the environment we're designed for. This is what our senses are designed for. We're not designed to stare at a screen for 8 or 10 hours a day. We're designed to have sight with different depth fields, nearsightedness, farsightedness, to take in a plethora of sounds and sights and smells, and just that alone brings a sense of deep joy, of being alive, of being human, of relationship, real relationship. I don't mean just sitting down with a person and chit-chatting. That is one dimension of relationship, but multidimensional relationship is being immersed in the hoop of life and being connected with this plethora of impulses and voices and impressions and listening to the language. There's a common language that everything is communicating with that has nothing to do with language as we know it. And this is why there's this beautiful balance in nature. Everybody's getting along out there. And very different from us humans and how we don't get along. It's not that difficult. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. We just have to open up and embrace and accept.
Good point. I want to bring something up that I think is really important, and then I've got a whole line of questions coming into me, so we'll get to that. But you just mentioned the concrete jungles, and so many of us are accustomed to living in that kind of area. Mostly what we hear are traffic noises, sirens, helicopters, planes up above, and our ears aren't attuned to the calls of nature that are there, as you said, beneath the day-to-day noises or at night. Now, in your chapter, Enter the Silence, Listen and You Will See, You talk about the dynamics of silence and learning to listen. And for example, I'm blessed in having lots and lots of birds of all kinds around here.
Ooh, yeah.
So instead of me hearing the drone of the freeway overpass, which is several blocks down, I've blocked that out in favor of bird songs during the day and at night. So it's not impossible. So how can others learn to listen, especially those who don't have any forests or wilderness nearby?
That's not so difficult. And in fact, birds are a great place to start because birds are everywhere.
Yeah.
Pigeons, for example, you can go to a park and see pigeons foraging on the ground. You can even feed the pigeons and bring them to you and watch them and listen to them. And you know, the beauty of listening and learning bird language, which is a doorway to what I call nature speak, which is the universal language that all animals speak in. There are just different accents or different dialects, you might say, because bears and pigeons and bees and trees all speak the same language. And this is why Native people around the world call all of the plants and animals their brothers and sisters. They mean it literally because they live with them, and there's this interdependence, and there is this real relationship. There's this talking. Many of you are probably familiar with animal guides. This is the closest relationship that we have, closer than a relationship with another person, actually, because we share our spirit, we share our soul with this guardian animal, with this animal guide. So I think I'm getting off track. What was your question?
No, it's not. Nothing you say is off track tonight, because it's all really good. Just, how we learn to block out the real world and get back to the original world.
Yeah. We learn by listening. And this is really important because we think ideally about the quiet forest or the tranquil vista that we see, and the still pond. Well, this is an illusion. It's a myth. I understand the romantic draw to it because we have such clutter in our lives. We want the forest to be quiet. We want to go there for peace and tranquility. But that forest and that pond and that tranquil vista is as busy as any mall on a Friday night. There is so much going on, and we just have it all tuned out. Like you said, you tune out the freeway in order that you can hear the birds. Well, that process of tuning out causes us to be numbed out when we go out in the woods, and it seems quiet because we're not passive receptors. We are passive receptors, and things aren't just blaring at us as through a media screen or over the radio or something. Everything's not there to entertain us. We need to be interactive rather than just being passive receptors if we're going to pick it up. And there are a couple of ways to do that. The first way is to not sit still. A lot of people go out in the woods and they want to sit. There's a popular technique that's called a sit spot. You go out and you sit somewhere every day. You can do it in a park or in your backyard and just observe what's going on. And that's beautiful, and you can learn so much. Yet you're still a passive receptor. You're taking the city out in the woods with you or out in your backyard with you. Now, if you watch a cat doesn't sit still. You watch a cat stalking very, very gingerly across the yard or through the hedgerows, and that cat is moving within the greater movement. And when you move, every time you take a step, you gain a new perspective. So you may not see a bird over there in the bushes where you're sitting. However, if you take a step off to the side, all of a sudden you gain a new perspective. That those leaves in front of that bird are all of a sudden, not blocking that bird anymore. So the way we keep moving, just move within the greater movement. That's a mantra that I use, and you notice things. In fact, you notice it if you notice the way chickens or turkeys or even pigeons walk. You see their heads bobbing back and forth. Well, the reason for that is so they can keep gaining new perspectives. so that they can have this field of vision rather than just sitting and staring. So
like we do.
Like we do, right. So this is the first thing to do. Go out in your backyard or go in the woods, but move slowly. It doesn't matter. Just move slowly and stealthily. Wear soft footwear so that you can feel the ground and not make any noises. You're not crunching things underneath you. And just stalk along, and you'll be surprised as to how much more you see. Also, you're attuning your senses, because when we sit down, a majority of our senses shut down. But when we're moving, we're stimulating our senses. We hear better when we move. We see better when we move. We feel better when we move. Mm-hmm. That's just the way we're designed to function.
Right.
Another trick is getting up with the dawn, because that is when there's all this vibrant energy. You listen to birds. Now, you know that at first light the birds start to sing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when they're the most active, and the night animals are going to sleep, and the daytime animals are waking up at dawn. So there's this overlap of the night animals and the day animals, and there's so much activity going on there. Animals are waking up, they're hungry right away, they're going out to get a drink. There's a lot of activity. And especially in the city, boy, if you go to a city park or your backyard, or sometimes just right down the street, you see the raccoons and the opossums, depending upon where you live, even the foxes and sometimes coyotes. Coyotes are moving into our cities.
Yeah,
you see them. So if you're up early, you notice all of this. But if you sleep in and wait and go out, everything is quiet. Or that type of quiet anyway. Nature is all settled down as far as the easy to see and interact with animals.
I think that the birds around here are insomniacs because they chirp and they sound so happy all night long, and I really like that. It's a good lullaby. It's really a good. All right, I'm going to start with the questions now. I mean, I've got done tons of my own, but let's hit the chat room questions.
Great.
First one: what wild animal were you the closest with, and what did you learn from them?
Well, I'm the very closest with owl, barred owls in particular. Owl is my animal guide.
Mm-hmm.
However, I learned most, and that's where I get my regular guidance from. However, I learned directly most from wolves, and that was partly because I connected with the spirit of wolves since I was a kid. As I said, from my earliest memories, I was running around out in the back fields and woods behind our house, and I could feel the spirit of the wolves. They were exterminated from my state. I live in Wisconsin. They were exterminated back around the turn of the last century. But the spirits were still there. I could feel them. And the wolf was always the spirit of the wilds to me. And I consider the wolf to be a very strong guide of mine, a very strong animal guide. And in my early 20s, I had the fortune to live with a pack of wolves, a pack of semi-domestic wolves for several years, and I learned so much from them. And the biggest thing I learned from them, I think, I don't know if I can even call it the biggest thing because I gained so much, but I learned emotional honesty. And that is so important in all relationships, to be true to who I am and how I am, and to share that with the people I'm closest with, the people I have trusting relationships with. And the way I did that, when I was in my early 20s, I was struggling in my relationships. I was married, and I was unhappy in that relationship. I didn't feel fulfilled, and I externalized. I blamed it on my wife at the time, and I was having trouble at work, and I saw my relationships with my friends as so shallow, and I didn't feel good about being a human, essentially. I guess I just wished I was a wild human, and my closest relationships were with the animals. I essentially reverted to my childhood, and when I went out to be with the wolves, I was accustomed to taking who I was in the civilized world along with me, putting up a front, trying to get along with people, not speaking my truth with people, but saying essentially what they wanted to hear, or at least the way it was more palatable to them, and they saw right through it. They saw my melancholy. They realized that I was struggling with depression. They realized that I wasn't being true to who I was. I wasn't speaking my truth with my species, with my own species. And they kept a respectful distance from me, and I could just feel their empathy, They typically, when I would go out to see them, when I was in a good place, right away they'd come up to me and they'd be wagging their tails and jumping all over me, and I'd get down on the ground and greet them in the way that wolves greet each other. We'd be rubbing our bodies together, and I'd roll over on my back, and they'd open their mouths and put them around my neck. It's a sign of submission and trust. I'm exposing my belly to them, and they would do the same thing to me when I was with them, and one of the wolves would come in and greet the pack. All the rest of the pack would go over there, and the wolf would submit to the pack. And that they were very cautious about that when I wasn't being true to myself, when I wasn't in the now, when I wasn't being my spontaneous self, when I was bringing my baggage to them. They did not fully accept me. They saw right through me. I could not fake them out. It's beautiful. They could read me. And there it is again. And there's nature speak. There's that language that speaks beyond words. And that's the richness of relationship. And it's not just, everything is relationship in nature. And I think it is in our lives too. Everything is about relationship. And they have to function that way. If you can imagine the prey-predator relationship, a wolf and a deer, for example. A wolf is hungry, and the deer wants to survive, of course. Well, if the wolf is going to eat, the wolf has to read the deer's true intentions. And if the deer wants to survive, the deer has to read the wolf's true intentions. And they have this interplay going, and they keep each other sharp this way. They have to. If they try to fake each other out, it doesn't work. They have to learn to see through it, or they're not going to eat, they're not going to survive. And the wolf and the deer need each other, believe it or not. The wolves cannot survive without the deer, and the deer cannot survive without the wolves, because the deer would overpopulate. The sick deer would spread disease throughout the herd. The wolves catch the sick deer because they're the easiest to catch, and they eat them, they consume them. They keep the deer herd sharp as well, because they chase the deer, they keep the deer strong, and that the strongest deer are the ones who pass their genes on to the next generation. So even though the prey-predator relationship may seem something terrible to some people, it's essential.
Yeah, I never quite thought of it that way, and makes perfect sense. Okay, got another question. Do trees and plants react to humans differently? Do they recognize those who want to help versus those who want to harm? And can humans sense that?
Boy, this is a great question. My elders, they taught me that whenever I wanted or needed something, to not take it for granted. Just because a plant is a plant and not an animal doesn't mean that I can just go and take that plant or gather from that plant, pick the leaves, pick the berries, but go and talk to the plant. Ask the plant if I can have some of her leaves, I can have some of her fruit. And the interesting thing here is that when I do that, the plant isn't necessarily talking to me in the way that we know about talking. Oh, this is, hey, I don't want to be, I want to save my fruit, or, because there are chipmunks living in the area here, and they need the fruit more than you do, so go to another please go to another plant. It's not that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's when we the precept, the native precept, is that giving is receiving, and rather than just coming from my ego and saying, gimme, 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 this, I need this, first of all, I want to give something. Even if I have nothing, I'm going to give something. The Ojibwe people in my area, and many native people, will carry around what's called an offering pouch, and they'll have tobacco in it, or kinnikinnick, which is a mixture of sacred herbs. And they will take a pinch of that herb, and they will infuse it with their energy, with their spirit, and they will lay it before the plant, and as an offering, as a giving, something of themselves. And this creates the opening where we are now receptive to what this plant has to say. And the interesting thing is it's not really the plant speaking, but it's the hoop of life, it's the hoop of relations right there, because the particular plant is just an organ within the greater organism. Mm-hmm. You know, if I would look at you, Marla, and I would go to your liver and I would want to communicate with your liver, well, your liver is nothing without your heart and your lungs and your brain and your nerves and your tongue and your face and your legs. That gives the liver life. So I'm speaking with the whole organism when I come to communicate with you. And it's the same with this plant. I'm not communicating with just this plant, because this plant is like your liver, you know, nothing in and of itself. But this plant connected with the fertile earth that she's rooted in, and the sun who's shining upon her, and the shade of the maple tree next to her, and the deer who browse upon the plant. It's all of this together that I open to, you know, the whole organism, and that's what speaks to me. And then I find out whether it's right to pick some leaves from this plant or not.
It's very interesting. Just got a question, third party over. It's from Facebook. They want to know why you think that most humans are so bad at sensing intent.
Boy, that's a delicate question.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because of our filters. It's, if we are going to truly communicate with somebody, communication is listening, it's not speaking. I was hitchhiking through North Dakota once, and the Blackfoot Reservation is up on almost to the Canadian border, and I met some elders there, and I was in my early 20s, and I was all full of questions. You know, I wanted to know this, I wanted to know that, and I was following this elder around, and he turned around to me and he said, "Tamarack, you know, it's really nice that you are inquisitive, you're asking questions. However, when you ask a question, you already know what you want to know. And how do you know what you want to know? To be questioning is one thing, but to ask a question, you think you know what you're supposed to know. And when you're talking, period, you're not listening. And in order to learn, it's important to listen, to enter the silence." And I felt shamed right away, because I thought I was doing such a great thing by being inquisitive. I thought that was openness. And he just caused me to realize that it was the other way around. Mm-hmm. That listening is what's going to bring me wisdom, or is going to open me to wisdom. And I think I lost track of the question again. I think I'm off on a tangent. Could you repeat the question, please?
No, I just lost it. Hang on a second. Got to get back to where it was. Why so many humans are so bad at sensing intent?
Oh, yeah. We're bad at sensing intent because the intent is, it takes getting beyond our egos. It takes getting beyond our own needs, our own perceptions, our own belief systems, our own habits and patterns. And so what we do is we filter everything through our belief system, essentially, and we see what we want to see. We don't see what's there, but we create something out of what's in front of us. So we don't pick up the intent. We don't pick up another person's true intent. we don't pick up nature's intent. Instead, we interpret it to feed us. What's best for me? Well, it doesn't work that way, because with the wolves, for example, I learned from the wolves that what's best for the pack is what's best for any individual wolf.
Right. Another question. Is it possible for humans to understand the feelings of plants in a dialogue with them? In the way trees talk and nourish the fallen and sick, how can we read that to help?
Boy, here it's about being rather than doing. You know, we think there's something we need to do, there's some way we can help, there's some way we can be engaged. And actually, it's a lot easier than that. We need to relax, just relax and listen, and everything will work itself out. There's a greater rhythm, there's a greater intent that we simply cannot connect with. We just have to listen. It comes back to listening again, and everything will work itself out. There's already an equation, a very complex equation that's at play. And our place in that equation is imprinted. It's dictated in our limbic process, which is our intuitive mind or our subconsciousness or whatever you want to call it. It's something that goes beyond what we can grasp consciously. 95% of what goes on with us is occurring in our intuitive mind. We think we're making decisions and we think we have control. But that's just 1 to 5% of what's going on in our minds. We can just relax and allow our conscious minds to serve our deeper mind. We would be a lot further ahead, and everything would work itself out. When we get involved up in our rational minds, that's when we make a mess and we try to reinvent the wheel. We think we can fix things. We think we can make nature better. And nature is its own perfection, and we don't have to do anything other than relax into it.
Relax is a word that's foreign to a whole lot of people.
Yeah, truly.
So how do animals hear us? How do they read us and understand us? And what is it? There's no trick to this, and again, relaxing is part of it, but what can we do to be understood by them, to be trusted by them, in order for them to want to understand?
Yeah, this is really important. I'll give an example. If I'm walking out on a hilltop, a bare hilltop surrounded by woods, what I would typically do if I was coming out of the city is that I would want to walk up on the hilltop so that I'd have a good view. I'd walk right out in the open. And I'm sending a signal to all the animals around that I'm an alien, I'm an invader, and I'm not going to have any real interaction with those animals because they're all going to run and hide. And they know my intent. My intent is to go out there and create a disturbance, whether I'm doing it consciously or not. I'm not going out there to on their terms. I'm not going out to interface with them. I'm not going out to meet them on their terms, meet them where they're at as a peer. Now, if I was a native person, I would walk around the perimeter of the field. I would stay in the shadows, because you notice that when you're in the shadows, you can see out into the light. But when you're out in the light, you cannot see into the shadows. Urban people know this. You know, if you're in your lit house and you look outside, you can't see anything. But if you're outside looking into a lit house, if there aren't any blinds or curtains, you can see what's going on in the house very easily, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing in the woods. So if we go and meet nature on nature's terms, we are going to be automatically interacting. We're going to join this symbiosis, and we're going to be in communication with the animals and the trees. We're going to be this movement within the greater movement. We're going to be the shadow of the shadow, and it's just going to come alive, and it's going to happen naturally and spontaneously.
Now, the book, Animals and Plants, as you say, are in constant communication with the world around them. And the book is about connecting with our primal minds and recognizing that we are nature as well. And it's kind of a 12-step program with a different approach to understanding and connecting. And there's nothing magical. There's nothing clairvoyant about it, being able to understand what animals say. And you say that we all feel the ancestral yearning. You've said that earlier tonight. It's all deep within it. Some people have put aside that for a very long time. And I don't think we can stress enough how important it is for us to relearn the old ways and get back in touch with who we once were.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the best steps is to get a hold of the book. I mean, this hour is just flying by so quickly, and between the questions in the chat room and the questions I have, I mean, we didn't even scratch the questions that I have for you. So we are going to have you back on this. But in the meantime, I think this is one of those books that people really should read, because it's not just helping with the environment or helping with the wildlife or the flora and the fauna. It changes us. And I know this as a witch, I know this. It happens. A lot of people don't. When I really got serious about who I am and what I am, I changed a great deal. There was a calmness that came over me. That I would, used to be like, oh, I'd be mad about this or mad about it. I don't have that anymore. I mean, obviously get mad sometimes, but there is a serenity involved. And that's why reading this book and picking up what you're trying to say and acting upon it, and none of it's difficult, I think is really, really important. And I want to bring up something, too, before our time runs away, because we've talked a lot about wolves tonight, but I want to throw in here that all the proceeds, your proceeds from this book, are going to support the creation of the Brother Wolf Foundation. Now, can you please tell everybody kind of briefly what the foundation is all about and where they can learn more about it?
Yes. First of all, you can learn more about it by going to brotherwolffoundation.org or just Googling my name, Tamarack Song, and my webpage will come up, and there's a link to the primitive skill school I work for, and to the Brother Wolf Foundation. I'm setting up a foundation to build a what's the term? A sanctuary, actually, for wolves that have come from puppy mills. Wolves are there's this mystique about wolves that I talked about earlier that just enraptured me when I was a child. And some people buy wolf pups because they want. I can understand the yearning, the draw to have a piece of the wilds, and they expect to raise them like dogs, and it doesn't work that way. And these poor wolves, they end up either euthanized or in animal shelters, or they're just stuck in a pen in the backyard, and sometimes they end up freaking out and attacking people, getting out of their pens. They're tremendous climbers. You can't keep them penned up like you can a dog by any means. They oftentimes get out. And these poor wolves, it's not their fault, and they end up... I get calls oftentimes because a lot of people, law enforcement agents and game wardens, know about me, and they know about my knowledge of wolves, and they ask, what can I do with this animal? I don't want to kill this animal, it's such a beautiful animal. It's not this animal's fault, but we had to confiscate this animal because the animal bit a child or jumped through a window, or the people couldn't take care of the animal anymore. And I want to I want to create a sanctuary for these wolves so that they can live out their lives in a natural environment. Those of us who are involved in this project, the Brother Wolf Foundation, are going to procure a large tract of land and fence it in. These animals can't be released in the wilds anymore because they're imprinted upon humans, and they did not grow up learning the ways of the wilds. It's just too late for them. However, they can still live out their natural lives in a natural environment. And just like us, they have their ancestral memories, and they will come back to a large degree. And I want to use the Brother Wolf Sanctuary as an educational facility so that people can come and observe the wolves. And I don't mean just looking through a screen or through a glass window at the wolves, but I'm going to have an elevated walkway that goes over the wolves' enclosure. It's going to be a large enclosure, maybe 100 or 200 acres. And people will walk silently and meditatively over so that they can observe and see and feel and be immersed in the middle of this wolf pack's territory. Just feel and sense what it's like. We evolved with wolves. There's one theory is that wolves taught us to hunt when our ancestors left the jungle and came out into the savanna. The wolves were pack animals, clan animals, and they hunted, and we probably foraged on their kills, and we watched them and we followed them, and we developed this relationship with them, which is why some of the wolves started hanging around with us and essentially domesticated themselves and became our dogs. We have this intrinsic relationship with dogs, which is the modern version of our primary relationship with wolves. So this is what I'm wanting to do with the Brother Wolf Foundation.
That's great. Now, if people want to find out more information about that, and also you're teaching drum outdoor school. Your website is tamaracksong.org, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you're also on Facebook. If people want to find you there, they can check you out and ask questions. I'm sure if somebody has anything to ask, you'll get back to them.
I'd be glad to.
The other thing, I'm going to close on this because it's kind of a neat quote. You said that when you were younger, communicating with the outside world would drain your spirit. But now you say it makes you stronger. And I love the wolf quote. I am like a wolf who wanders into the city, sees how the dogs live, and becomes all the more clear and grateful that he is a wolf. And that just makes so much sense. I just absolutely love that and wanted to share it because...
Oh, great.
I got it. Well, we're almost out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight and sharing your wisdom with all of us. Everybody in the chat room is just very happy that you came and watch you back, so we'll definitely do that.
Oh,
and good. Look forward to it. And I also want to thank everybody in the chat room and everybody listening as well. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at this same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2014. Moonlight Hall by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.